but where do Black men have to talk? So I open up this platform to our brothers from various industries so we can have some real conversation and give them a space to have a voice to speak. So with that being said, I do want to kick off some conversation. One of the things I want to talk about here, navigating beyond the stereotype. We see so many stereotypes on social media and then through movies and music. So anyone can grab this. What do you feel like Black men should do? First of all, what do you feel like is the stereotype? And then two, how should Black men be able to combat that? And anyone can take that question.
I'll start first. At an early age, like right out of college, I was very conscious of how my presence defined people who may have never, been in contact with a Black man before. When I first started my career, I worked at an agency and I was the only Black male. And for me, I was very conscious at an early age of how I show up here will be some people's first experience with a Black man. So how am I carrying myself? How am I showing up? Because their impressions of another Black man may come from how I show up and what they learned from me. And so just for me, is in every room that I go into, I'm just myself, but I also do things in excellence. I show up in excellence. I treat people with respect, and a lot of these things are core values for me, but I'm very conscious of the weight that I carry when it comes to representing Black men in any room that I walk into. Right. And so for me, that's how I do it. Like I make sure that when I show up, I'm showing up as me, I'm showing up 100%, but I'm also very conscious of the impact that I leave when I leave a room, right? And for me, that's some of the things that I do.
I really like that. That's a really good point. Does anyone else want to jump into that?
Absolutely, Camille. I want to give a different side to that because as I've gotten older, I've learned how to bring all of me into the room instead of leaving the parts out that I felt were undesirable, I felt that were uncomfortable for other people. I am learning now to bring all of me into the room and let the people adjust simply because I am simply who I am. Brandon said, generally, when I come into a room, people say, well, you have such a presence. But the thing about that presence is that took work. As a child, I used to walk with my head held down, and my mother used to pop me in the back of the head and say, hold your head up. And so I had to teach myself how to show up into the room and keep my eyes, look people in the eye when I speak to them. So it's been a process, and society doesn't necessarily help because we are learning that there are two sides to the coin. There are some people that want you to bring all of you into the room and show up as a man. And there's some people that say, well, okay, well, that's too much machismo for the room. So it's like you have to find that good, healthy balance, I think.
Really, really good. Michael, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree. Had a similar experience as Derek had. I worked for a company, Ingles Supermarkets, which is a small regional grocery chain, and I was the only Black manager that was there. So I knew that I wasn't just representing me; I was representing all Black men that were trying to be managers with Ingles, which was extremely difficult to do back in the early 2000s. In the metro areas, they have a lot of Black managers. But if you go into areas where Ingles stores are very profitable, you only see white managers. So I agree with Derek, just, showing up with excellence. It is hard because sometimes you go in and you almost can't make a mistake because it'll be used against you. So I agree with Derek on that.
That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. I think one of the things I think Rakani has brought out was the point how a lot of times with brothers, there's a presence. And Antoine and I've had this conversation before when it talks about how Black men present themselves is taken as aggressive when that's not the case. So Antoine, can you kind of unpack that point for us a little bit more? We had that conversation on a previous episode of the Speaker Podcast, talking about how when Black men present themselves and show up, but it's perceived as aggressive.
Yes, we have had that conversation. And I think that it's always important just to kind of ground this conversation. I think that it's important to even think historically what Black men have encountered and what society has put upon us in this country. I think you can't have this conversation without talking about things like slavery and what we endured during slavery and how those themes were then passed on not that many generations ago. So when you think about that, you think about the fact that when we show up in society, there's certain societal norms that are put upon us that we've had no input in. We didn't choose them. We didn't say this is how we should act. Somebody put these norms upon us, and these norms were not put in place by other Black men. So I think that that's a constant dichotomy that we're having to encounter, where we have this expectation of what we're supposed to be like. And some of that can be informed by the Black church. Some of that can be informed by our Black mothers and some of the Black females around us. And then some of it can just be informed by society in general, where we can't feel, we can't have emotions, we can't show weakness. But who defines weakness? It's oftentimes not us. So I think that it's important that you have things that are socially constructed, but then you have an individually applied perspective. And I'm going to always introduce my individually applied perspective when I walk into a room. And similar to what I think two other people have said, I've become less apologetic when I come into the room. I don't feel like I have to come into a room and feel like I'm representing the entire Black male race, because that's impossible to do. We all have different experiences. I'm going to carry myself well, but I'm going to be unapologetic about how I present myself. And if the people in the room are offended by that, I'm not going to apologize for that.
That's really good. So with that being said, I want to bounce off Brandon, touching on something Antoine said. So how do you, be in corporate America, how do you navigate beyond the stereotype, Brandon?
Yeah, great question. So as she said, I do work in the corporate world as a dual director of sales for a hotel company. The first thing I have to address is, and it's probably going to be coming from a different perspective, is in the Black community, I'm not actually Black, I'm white. Like as one of my poems I wrote, look at me, tell me what you see. Even my own brothers called me a half-breed. Like around them, I'm not even Black enough to be Black. But then in the white corporate America, I'm not white enough to be white. So I find myself, as he said, this duality or this dichotomy to where it's really finding out I have to decide who I'm going to be. Like one of the things I've always struggled with is how do I do my hair? Like I have a natural widow's peak. So do I get the fresh line up and then I have this little hair right here growing down? And so then I have to go to the other side because I am also white, that I have to speak with, my white counterparts and ask them, how do I carry myself if I was white? And it's a constant blending and merging these things together. So I recognize that I am viewed in corporate America as a Black male, but the struggle that I have to also fight that's not really giving me the grounded support that I would hope to have is that I'm not Black enough to be Black in my own family. So I have found myself deciding for myself what I'm going to be. And if I am opening up the doors for those that will come after me, can I allow them, as they just said, to be unapologetic by the way that I carry myself? Can I give them the confidence that even though I had to formulate who I am, that's a struggle that we all go through, is just from a different perspective. So it's been a fight. It has been a battle. But I think that because of the battle, my sword is getting more sharp and I'm able to better carry myself day in and day out with confidence. So, yeah.
Wow, that's deep. And I think that's something that is not discussed too, as far as biracial, multiracial individuals, that complex, whether, not Black enough, not white enough, and how do you just define your own person? So that's definitely another conversation I do want to open up and bring you back for, because I believe that's very important too. Dr. Woodson, what do you feel about what we're talking about as far as navigating beyond the stereotype?
Well, so my work, a lot of it is in education. And so I see the impact that society has on our young people starting in elementary school and moving through. And so I know that a lot of what is deemed characteristic of Black males is ingrained in them in middle school. Just like Brandon, I had similar issues. I came from a prominent Black family, so I went to some of the best schools. It wasn't until high school that I even went to a predominantly Black school. And when I got there, I had to battle that why you talk white, why do you act white? I did not have a point of reference for what they deemed appropriate. It wasn't until I went to Morehouse for undergrad that I even saw Black males beyond my family that were really successful. So growing up in Detroit, that's not what we saw. And so I think that, some of what has been deemed characteristic or stereotypical has nothing to do with us. Like those traits and characteristics are really put on us by other people. And so when I started working at the college level, my biggest challenge was that we would have to spend the first 2 years unindoctrinating our Black males to the fact that they could be successful. And so I think that we really need to consider even the damage that our own culture has on our Black males. I was told, well, you're in Detroit, you'll either end up in jail or dead before you're 21. And so the whole time I was growing up, that was what was in my head, not let's be successful, not let's start our own company, not let's be a vice president of a college. So I think that even in our own culture, we need to have some real discussions about how we are impacting our young males, even at that middle school, in that like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 range.
That's really good. I think there's so many things here that we're going to unpack tonight. First of all, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. And I appreciate your transparency and your honesty during this conversation. For those, if you're just tuning in, please like, share, and comment. Let someone know we're here. We're having a roundtable discussion with Black men that are the next generation of leaders, creators, and innovators in the industry. We're discussing topics that are impacting our culture and our community. So please drop a heart comment in the comments below. Share this. Let someone know that we're here and we're having this discussion. With that being said, gentlemen, what is one thing you wish that people knew about Black men in terms of what you need emotionally?
I'll take that one if possible.
Okay, go ahead.
I would say validation is often missed with Black men. I feel as if, kind of based on the conversation that we just had prior to that, it's almost like a thing within our community that if you validate a Black man, I'm not talking about a kid because, we do that with kids, but as you begin to mature, you'll find that a lot of that validation starts to just kind of dwindle away, and you're not told as much that you're handsome. You're not told as much that you're loved. The hugs stop after you are, after a certain age. The affection stops. The validation, son, I'm proud of you. All of that kind of stuff. Nephew, I'm really proud of you. And what you start to find in the Black community with our men is that we say things with negative undertone. Oh, you think you somebody now? Oh, you think you all that now? Oh, you got a little job. You thinking, and so it's always this twisted compliment that is often has a subliminal message underneath it that you feel and you sense. And it's almost like a thing where you don't even want to succeed too bad or too much because you never want to be separated from the tribe. Even if that tribe is toxic, even if that tribe is not giving you what you need emotionally, you still want to stick around. So sometimes as Black men, we minimize our efforts to be great because we don't want to be too great. If we're too great, now we'll get separated from the herd, because at the end of the day, we all got to remember that we are tribal beings. So we thrive in tribes. And if you know anything about the psychology of that, is that we do anything to fit in. We do anything not to get separated from the herd, because in herd, we find safety, even if the damage that we endure most of the time comes from the herd. So I would say what Black men often don't say they need is validation. To say, I see you, you're doing a good job, without there being a negative, condescending undertone to it. You're just doing a good job. Not you think you all that. No, you're doing a good job, son. Friend, you're doing an amazing job. Friend, I'm proud of you. Friend, you make me smile. I'll say that.
That's really, really good. And the fact that you said that, I hope those listening take note of that. It's very important. And just me as a Black woman, I think Black men, from the time you step out of the door, there's a target on your back. You're driving down the street. It doesn't matter if you're driving a Benz, a Beamer, a Hummer. You're a Black man in a certain neighborhood. So immediately there's a target on your back. If you show up and present a certain way, you're being aggressive. And you're always conscious of all these things. So the fact that you're saying those things, Mark, I think is really, really important. And just thank you for sharing that. And just have you guys here, just even in this conversation, I think alone speaks volumes, because I think it's really important for men to know that so the loved one and the people, those in their lives, can know these are the things they need to hear. And this is a space where people can learn, take note, and then correct and redirect. Because when you know better, you do what? You do better. So we're going on to the next conversation. I'm going to say a phrase, and I want someone to unpack that for me. I'm going to say physical man, psychological boy.
Okay. So this is going to marry to what Mark said about validation. You're a physical man, but you're a psychological boy because you were never validated as a child, or your validation came few and far between. And so when you grow up and you're a physical man and you're literally waiting for someone to acknowledge the little boy, or to at least acknowledge that you have now transitioned into a man, that child or that little person is still waiting. So you're not aware of it until it literally becomes a thing. And so literally when you are thinking physical man, psychological boy, that child still has to be validated. You as a man, I as a man have had to go back and tell little me, hey, you're good. Nobody's coming to save you. Dry your eyes, lift up your head, put your shoulders back, and let's do this. And that's still a constant thing. And whether we want to acknowledge it or not, that literally is one of the things that is a shackle around a man's ankles, because that man seeks validation from wherever he can get it from, whether it be a spouse, whether it be a woman, whether it be a man, whether they are literally looking for someone to acknowledge that broken space that was never acknowledged as a child.
Thank you. JT,
Can I?
what are you
Oh,
on
I'm
that?
sorry.
JT?
I'm sorry. I heard Brandon getting ready to say something.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
What are your thoughts on that?
For me?
Yes.
Okay. I agree with what he just said. And I do say when those moments come, I'm always the one to say, what's the root? Where did it come from? Who started that? Was this during your childhood? If it was, okay, where? Because one of the things that I saw on TV was a conversation that was happening, and it stuck with me. They were sharing about, I think the guy was training other counselors, psychiatrists, on how to have conversation with the individual that is needing that help. And the guy was asking him, did your father start it? Did your father do that? Great. And what happened was, what came after that question, it became a cadence that sounded like his father. So the guy was like, stop. He was like, do you hear what you just asked him? You have to be careful not to jump back into that rhythm of what he is trying to get removed out, or not removed, but healed in his mind. You can't trigger those patterns. So I think it's something for us to, when we're seeing, or we're in that moment where we see a physical man but a psychological boy, where did it start? Who are the connectors? What are the triggers? And let's try not to trigger that. Let's try to do the opposite, because I think when people start experiencing the other side that they never thought they could get, that's when hope is then built. That, okay, I can change. Okay, I can be better. I can, grow up. I can put away childish things and become a full, what we call man. So that's my take on it. Just being able to know what started it, where did it come from, and learn from that moment on how we can be the total opposite and provide support in that situation.
I love that. Brandon, I think you were going to hop in and say something.
Yeah, I do. I definitely agree that validation plays a pivotal role. But also, when I view it from this standpoint, when it says in the Bible, when he did something, there was nobody else around there to congratulate him. It says that he did something, and then he told himself, and it was good. Sometimes we have to have the ability to validate ourselves in the absence of other people, because if not, I fear we may run the risk of becoming slaves to their validation, that we then become actors in search of getting the applaud from people. We start doing things not because it's who we are, but because we're trying to be applauded by other people. I'm reminded of David that says he had to be anointed 2 or 3 times to make him believe that he was actually going to be the king. Like, he was anointed the one time. You would think that's all that it would take, but it took him being anointed again and then again, because sometimes it takes somebody to be able to call the king out of the boy. So I do agree with that. that we do need somebody that's able to do that. And then at some point in time, it should be that we can give it to ourselves, that we have put that away. Because as he made the point, JT, when I became a man, I put away childish things. They're still there. It's still there. It's an active choice to put those things away. And I think that at some point in time, I hope that we transcend into that point as becoming men, that I no longer require the validation of others, that I can tell myself and it was good.
And I want to say with what he just stated, and in connection to what you all were sharing with the last conversation and Mark bringing up validation, I think in the scheme of all of this, if we begin to create a culture to where we accept men for being who they are and accept their difference, they can do those moments where God stood back and saw what he made and said it was good. He didn't say, should that have been bluer? Should that have been right there? What about this? No, he stepped back and said it's good. And how many times do we create something and we step back and look at what we create and say it's good? Not because we seen the result, we seen the success, people told us, because I made it. I did it. I thought of it. I brought it to fruition. Here it is. It is good. I don't care what you say about me. I know it's good for me. It may not give the results that some may think, but I'm okay with that. And I think if we build that culture to where we are validating and accepting men for being different, for thinking their way, for saying, okay, instead of saying, I think I would have did it that way, saying, that's dope. I like that. That's a way I didn't think about. Let's try that. Let's do that. I think we'll begin to build a culture to where it's common to accept the difference. Because I think a lot of this is connected with us not owning our difference and being okay that I am different, that I am a different color. Yeah, I may have the same name, but I'm okay with that. And I may talk differently. I may look different. My hair may be better because I think I got the best hair on here. Right. So I'm not shaded with anybody, but in the scheme of all of it, I think with what we've been saying and with what Brandon just stated, just creating that culture to where I'm okay with you being different from me and I'm okay with you doing it, so that in the scheme of even now, while I'm doing work, one of the hardest things that I've been working on in 2021 is doing it when I get it first. Don't pick up the phone and call anybody. Don't research anything. Don't try to see if it's already been done. Baby, let me just do it because it came to me. Do I have enough energy in myself to trust the ideas that are coming to me, put it together, and then go research it? Why? Because I want to find out, is anyone doing it, or can I find confirmation instead of allowing myself to jump and find it and then minimize what I've done because that looks complete. So let me start doing that. So, yeah.
I just want to add one thing completely. When I hear that statement, I think about it differently. And I think about just mental health just in general. And the fact that when we are young, we are really taught that emotions are not healthy, that men don't show their emotions, that is not what men do. And so what we really do when our Black males become men, we create like this pressure cooker where we don't, many of us know how to manage our emotions, how to express ourselves effectively. We are discouraged from ever seeing counselors. And so I think that some of what we see with this physically a man, mentally a boy, is an inability to just manage the realities of adulthood. I have a lot of young males I mentor across the country. And the first thing I have to get them to do is release some of these emotional issues and some of this baggage that many of them have carried with them most of their lives. So when I think about that, I just think about the fact that we really as a community need to do a better job of mental health work with our young males. So when they get there, we don't have this pressure cooker. And I'm speaking from experience because I was the same way. And until I started therapy in my late 20s, there was a lot of stuff that I could not manage. And my responses to adults in many cases were not effective or appropriate.
That's really, really good. I want to pivot just a little bit because this is something that's been on my mind. And I've asked someone this question before. As Black men, you guys go through so much. You have so many things that you deal with throughout your life, ups and downs. And when you're in a relationship with someone you love, someone you're dating, someone you care about, or even if you're married, how can you as a man navigate that space when you're going through it, but you don't make the person that you feel with feel like they're walking on eggshells or that they're shut out or unsafe? And anyone can grab that question.
Can you repeat the question?
When you're in a relationship with someone and you're going through the ups and downs of life, how do you navigate what you're going through, but you don't make your partner feel emotionally unsafe?
So I think I didn't do it effectively at the front end. So I would just be honest and transparent and say that I was not effective at this at all. But I think the main issue is our ability to communicate, and not communicate what's going on in the situation, but communicate how we're feeling and why we're responding a certain way. I think that our partners, whoever they may be, would probably feel more safe if they had a point of reference. But when you just blow up on people, or when you have these responses that the other person just thinks it's coming out of nowhere, in many cases, it's because as Black males, we are taught to internalize so much. And in general, we lash out at the people that we assume aren't going to go anywhere. I mean, that's just the reality. You know, we're young. The people we lash out at most are our parents and family because they kind of stuck there and they can't leave. And so I think that is important, our ability to really understand why we're feeling certain ways and why we're having these responses. Because if we are not able to communicate effectively, we can't certainly solve that problem.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
from
a good point. I'm sorry.
I'll add to that. I think it comes down to the whole conversation around language, right? Because for me, you know, early on, it was frustrating because I didn't have the language or the words to describe how I was feeling. So the frustration of not being able to clearly communicate how I was feeling to a loved one or somebody about the situation, and then me trying to explain it with them not getting it, just made the frustration a little bit more. And I think we see that a lot, not only present day as we continue to evolve as Black men, but then also in the younger generation, it's language. Even to go back to what Mark was saying, like, I can say, JT, yo, your hair looks fly now because I've done the work to get to the point where I can compliment another Black man and not make myself feel like, oh shoot, like I need to add some extra jargon to that, or like a little negative connotation, so it doesn't seem like, you know what I'm saying, like I'm being, you know, whatever the conversation or the word people want to use. Like I can give another brother a comment, yo, man, you look dope, you're handsome, man, and not feel a certain way because I've done the work. And I think if we can start to create the spaces where with our younger folks, which I didn't have this when I was younger, because I can count on one hand how many times I told my dad I loved him. Even to now, I say it more now as an adult, but as a kid, I never heard that from him. And so being able to create space and understand that now, and being able to create a language around expressing your feelings in a way where it becomes normal that I can compliment another brother and it doesn't have to be anything but that. You know what I'm saying? So language, giving youth the words to be able to describe their emotions and how I feel. And that goes back to the mental health piece. And I think it all connects in every aspect that we're talking about today. Is if I don't have the language, then I'm going to communicate it in another way because I am frustrated because I cannot say what I feel and no one is getting it because I don't have the words. Right.
Yeah. Can I add something to that too, Camille?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So I completely agree with both statements about the language, and just having to internalize a lot as a kid. And I know we've all heard this, you know, and I'll probably go on record saying our counterparts probably heard the same thing. You know, boys don't cry. You know, I don't know at what point we transition from being babies to whatever age. I don't know the standard age, but you're told certain things like you just don't show emotions. You know, you don't cry. You don't exhibit anything that you see a woman do. You shouldn't do that. So then when you start to feel these emotions, you really don't know what to do with it because there's no outlet that you've been given to share them. So that doesn't just stop in that moment. It actually starts to get worse as you become older and actually start experiencing different types of relationships. You know, it surpasses just a relationship with friends and family. Now you're in relationships and romantic relationships, and now there's issues, right? And so when issues arise, most Black men probably just shut down. We just get quiet. And it's so uncomfortable for people because they don't know what's wrong. You can't communicate what's wrong. They ask you what's wrong because there's a clear change of energy, clear change of how you're showing up, but you don't even have the language like Brandon said. You don't, I mean, like my man said, I'm sorry, you don't have the language to communicate how you feel, right? So it's just a weird space. And I think a lot of us just don't go to therapy, and we don't go, to get counseling so that we can actually work through those emotions and communicate it. And even to the point I have to find myself like, when was the last time you cried? When was the last time it's just talking to myself, release emotions and let things go? Because all of that is a pressure cooker. Like we said earlier, it's a pressure cooker. So it's just sitting there boiling up because you don't know how to communicate. You don't know how to express love. You don't know how to say, I love you. You don't know how to say I'm hurt. You don't know how to say I'm scared. You don't know how to communicate any of that. So that's the issue I think a lot of us have.
That's powerful. And then as you were talking, Mark, something came to my mind as far as not having that space, and something I think Wayne may have touched on, the shutting down. And I think too, a lot of men, particularly Black men, have experienced when they do find a space where they believe they are safe and feel safe, and they open up and become vulnerable, and they do it, and then later it's weaponized or used against them. And then it's like, well, see, that's why I don't talk to anybody. So can you guys kind of touch on that? Let's go to Michael to start that off about weaponization of conversation.
I think Antoine touched on it earlier. We're still dealing with the emotional trauma from slavery. Slavery was in, I think, 1619 in this country, and we're still dealing with the after effects today. If you think about what they called us, you were a boy, and that's what you were, a child. They wanted us to stay in that element of being a child so that you wouldn't pretty much connect with your tribe or, build up your community to where you could overthrow pretty much, your oppressor. I think if we as a community would realize that most of the stereotypes that we put on ourselves, I'm not sure who mentioned it earlier, but it didn't come from us. And we should stop using stereotypes on ourselves that are from other races that demonize us, that suppresses our feelings. Because I do understand, like during that slavery period, no, you couldn't show any emotion. That would have been used against you. Times are a little bit better. So it's okay to cry. It's okay to let your child know, hey, I love you. Telling someone that you love them is not a weakness. It's a strength. So I think if more of us realize that we're still dealing with the emotional trauma of slavery, I think we can start to address not all, but most of the issues, mental health issues that Black men have today.
That's really good. As he was talking, Antoine, I saw your face, and you were just like,
Well, can I touch on that, Ms. Camille,
yes,
from
please,
Antoine?
please.
I mean, from Mr. Michael. Yes. So I do agree with both Antoine and Michael in the slavery aspect of things. My great grandmother raised my mom, and she's the daughter of somebody that just come from being slaves. I'm from Oklahoma. So when you think about the generations of this, I'm only 3 or 4 generations removed from somebody that has a direct relationship with slavery. But I'm reminded of somebody when I think about Martin Luther King and Moses, when I make the comparison of them, as Moses was freeing the slaves, it says that the slaves groaned against him and said, we were better off as slaves. This lets me know that there is a mindset out there that some people actually like where they are. And I can back it up with this scripture. When Jesus asked the man by the pool, will you be made whole? Now, I do understand that we are, in fact, dealing with some of those traumas and childhood issues. But the question I ask people is, when will we be made whole? I agree. We need to have these conversations with people. And I think that we can have them, but we can have them amongst ourselves. Sometimes I'm learning that if somebody doesn't want to talk to you, it's fine. Let them be them. There's a scripture where it says, pick yourselves up and shake the dust off as a testimony to them. Some people don't want to hear what you're going through. They have no time for it. They're not trying to listen to anything you're talking about. So you're just going to make yourself mad. And I know that people get mad because if you remember the two, they were called the Barnacres brothers, the sons of thunder. Whenever somebody turned them down, they said, Jesus, you want us to cast down fire from heaven on them? Some of these dudes was about it, that if somebody didn't want to listen to what they went through, they said, can we cast down fire from heaven on them? You just don't want. What I'm learning in my life to recognize, this may not apply for everybody, is that at some point in our time, we have to acknowledge what it is. Yes, we were slaves, but there's some parts of that culture that we hold on to because we feel it's safer for us. It's best for us, as somebody else said earlier. So I asked then, when people say that I'm African American, I don't care for the term at all, because I don't feel African, because I have no ties to my culture, my heritage, my name. I don't have any of that, and I don't feel American because I don't get a chance to fully enjoy the rights and liberties that this country claims to offer us. So it seems as we have to decide who we're going to be. We have to decide what our culture is going to be and start from here. As Joshua said, I don't give a damn what y'all do anymore. Me and my house going to serve the Lord. There has to come a point in time where we recognize where we come from, and then we have to trust God that he's going to get us through where we need to be, and we have to make a stand and say, I'm not going to go and conform to the comings and goings of the world. I'm going to be ye transformed by the renewing of my mind and decide who I'm going to be. I just wanted to make sure that I said that to the slavery piece.
I fully agree with what Brandon's saying. I think the challenge is we're not honest in our community. We shield a lot of stuff. We pretend like everything's okay. And I think that exactly some of what he's saying is critical. First of all, we were not slaves. We were enslaved kings and queens from another country. And that's a big distinction when you're trying to shift people's mindsets. Because we need to realize that, even what Brandon said, before that, we already had an identity. And somewhere in our culture, there's been this disconnect that our people just started in the 1600s, and that's completely inaccurate. My great-grand uncle Cardew Woodson said that we can't advance if we keep relying on the people who are enslaving us to do stuff for us. And that's a critical component. We're not going to be able to do this work effectively if we don't take some ownership of managing our own stuff. People have lots to say about Islamic people and Jewish people, but if you go in those communities, those grocery stores are owned by their people. The businesses are owned by their people. If there are needs, they build their own community centers. I will never forget when I was an undergrad, they had put this picture of Brandy up over by the Muslim supermarket. When we came back the next day, they had spray painted a whole veil on her and covered her face. Now, at the time, I was like, this is extra, but no. This is our community, and these are our standards. And if you're going to be in here doing stuff, then you're going to adhere to our standards. We are not going to conform to yours. And I think that's the challenge. And sometimes our leaders get in these leadership positions, and they forget where they came from. And they don't really focus on us anymore. They focus on whoever they think is going to do the most for them. And that's an ineffective way of moving forward. And we can't do the work Brandon's referencing if we don't have some honest conversations about the stuff that's going on.
That's really good.
Camille, I wanted to make a point really quick.
Okay.
Obviously I work in mental health, and I've seen a lot of Black men in mental health. And I think that one of the distinctions that I always like to make when I first start working with a Black male that, let's say, has presented to me, is that mental health is an organic process. That means there's some kind of chemical imbalance. There's something going on that is causing functional and occupational distress. But absent of poverty, would this mental health still be in place? Absent of trauma, would this mental health still be in place? So I think that it's important. While there's definitely people that have just organic mental health issues, and there's a whole genetic component to it and a whole biological component to it, I think that it's also important to acknowledge that there are certain systems that are put in place that cause mental health to be a higher propensity on.
That's really, really good. I want everybody to hold that thought because we're about to go into a break. So don't go away. I'm going to bring back DJ Spade. We're going to thank some sponsors, and then we're going to pick up this conversation. So while we're on break, you guys, please like, share in the comments below. This is Heart and Soul 2021. This is your host, Camille Essick. I'm host of the Speaker Podcast. We have some phenomenal conversations